All right, today we're going to start with human ancestry. Some would call this evolution, and it kind of is. Keep in mind that everything I talk about, a lot of this is conjecture. We don't have all the fossil evidence to support everything we're talking about. But when we look at where we originally came from, what was there in the past, what the environment was like in the past, we can kind of make some ideas of what was going on. All right, so just a little joke of how we started as hunchbacked apes, and we're kind of returning to the hunchbacked ape. All right, so human evolution. So, like I said, the fossil record's not complete. There is some evidence, though, that does kind of lead to how humans evolved over time. DNA analysis has helped with this process, and we have looked at species that have more DNA in common with us, and so they're more likely to have arisen from a common ancestor. So, as Darwin said, he never said we descended from apes. He just said that apes and us had a common ancestor at one time. All right, so Homo sapiens, we kind of ironically named ourselves the wise human. Well, that remains to be seen. Uh, Probably existed about 700,000 years ago. And we evolved from about 60 million years ago from an ancestral rodent-like insect eater that flourished at the time. So we're talking about the age of the dinosaurs. Mammals did exist in small numbers. All right, so likely we started about 30 to 40 million years ago as Aegyptopithecus. So this is probably some sort of small monkey-like creature, about the size of a cat. We know it was tree dwelling because in Africa at the time, given the environment, everything was a tree dweller for the most part. Social animals, they can kind of tell where these animals had died in groups and things like that. And this probably led to us and the gibbons and the apes. And that's Aegyptopithecus. As we grew larger and got out of the trees a little bit, there was some possibilities here. We would have been called the hominoids during this period, meaning that we're both apes and ancestors would have been in this group, or apes and humans would have been in this group. Could walk. They have found some creatures in Asia and Europe. It's been named Dryopithecus or the oak ape about 22 to 32 million years ago. Size of a small child, small brains, pointed snout. So if you think of the chimpanzee with its mouth that kind of protrudes, we're talking about the pointed snout. All right, then we broke off from the apes and we became the hominin. So these are the ancestors to the humans. So gorillas, chimps, they have went their way. We're moving into our way. And that happened about 6 million years ago. We have found some fossils about 4 to 19 million years ago. They occurred. They're pretty scarce. Humans pretty much live near water, so those kind of fossil sites tend to get wiped out pretty easy. They don't know exactly what was the hominin that led to us. They found many types, including our Dithopithecus and Kadaba from Ethiopia, Sahelanthropus chidensis from Chad, and Ornithodogensis from Kenya. And you can kind of see our family tree and how it extends up here. So here is what we're talking about at this point, where the hominids broke off. Those are the early ones. And the chimps and bonobos are going to move up this way. And then, so we're talking about right in this period for the hominids. All right, Australopithecus. Probably people have heard of this one. Lived about 4 million years ago. They were bipedal, not a tree dweller. There were several species of them, known for their flat skull bases, so their face is becoming a little flatter. Still a very ape-like organism. ape-looking organism anyway. You wouldn't have thought this was a human. You would have thought it was more of a gorilla. Brain was about the size of a gorilla, so it's still fairly small yet. The teeth, though, are very human-like, which is very important because that allows the brain case to expand. Do that, we're lacking those massive gorilla jaws that were there before. So they're about 4 to 5 feet tall, and like I said, there's several species of Australopithecus, about 4 million years ago. All right, Australopithecus. Moving on, Lucy or Australopithecus afarensis, famous one. It's named Lucy because the Beatles song Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds was playing when they were digging this thing up. So they just named her Lucy. She has a larger brain, more human-like skull, the face. So we don't have that pointed snout anymore. It's tending to get smooshed in. There was a couple of other Australopithecus, Africanus and Gari. Uh, we know that Gari actually hunted and butchered meat. Still, though, a very small cranium. Very ape-like looking. These regions are from afar, where afarensis gets its name. That's the skeleton of Lucy right here. So you can see there's not a lot. We have to really put it together. This hip bone and this knee joint tends to show that it walked erect. Don't have a lot of the skull, but we do have the bottom jaw to see the teeth formation and things like that. All right, then we evolved enough that we became more human-looking. So Homo habilis would have been the first you would recognize as possibly human-looking. Probably the hair had reduced quite a bit, so been more skin. We're living in very hot climates, so that would have been important. These existed about 2.3 million years ago, lived in caves, communal living, they cared for their young. Foreheads becoming less pointed, more shallow. Massive brow ridges, so the bones above the brow stood out quite a bit. That's to basically protect your eyes when you're hunting from, especially with clawed creatures running around like lions that want to eat you. But you would have said this was a more human-looking organism. Brain is still small, about 1/3 the size of modern humans, and they coexisted and lived with Homo erectus. And definitely Homo erectus is the first thing you would have said, oh, this is probably a cousin. This is a human-looking thing. Hair is reduced quite a bit over the body. Still have that brow ridge that you can see above these eyes here. The face is quite flat. The skull's still a little angled. So if we look at the top here, you see that angle is still angled a bit, much like the gorilla, but it is flatter face. We don't have the pointed snout coming out anymore. They know they existed in female-male pairs, and basically we find their fossils all over the place. China, Java, Africa, Europe, Southeast Asia. They're basically all over what's the old world. Very social, cooperative tool using. So they have found very specific axes that they made and used. That's Homo erectus. And then eventually, you got to remember there's an ice age that goes on. Some of Homo erectus was stuck in Europe. Some of it was in Africa. In Africa, that's where we became the Homo sapiens we are today. We lost most of our hair, much taller, thinner limbs, and very similar to what we consider modern humans. They give it the name idaltu, and they lived about 156,000 years ago. So you would have said this is definitely human, pretty much indistinguishable. Probably dark skin due to the African sun. Up north, we wouldn't call them Homo sapiens. They were Neanderthals. These would have evolved from Homo erectus. They do have larger brains. That prominent brow arch is very large still, very muscular jaws. Their teeth are there's gaps in between them. They're very distinctly spaced. This is probably due to their meat-eating diet. So that's what they were doing, was hunting and eating meat, because that's all that was really available in that Ice Age land that they were living in. And they lived about 28,000, 150,000 years ago. Somewhere along that time, Cro-Magnon moved into this same area. They would have been the humans. They were communal jewelry. They made some very intricate cave art. There's some interesting movies on this cave art. Uh, it took a very sophisticated and very smart person to go through those caves, leave the art they did without any torches, because they're down pretty low where there wouldn't be enough oxygen for them to survive, let alone keep a torch lit. Um, for some unknown reason, 28,000 years ago, the Neanderthals disappeared. Some say that they were just outcompeted by the Cro-Magnon or killed off by the Cro-Magnon, interbred with the Cro-Magnon. Either way, Neanderthals are gone. If we look at how their skeletons look to ours, you can see some distinct differences. One, we've got a larger brain case. Their eyebrow ridges were more prominent than ours, so we do. The males still have them in humans. The nasal aperture, if you'll notice, it's much larger in Neanderthal. The reason is that it's actually designed to cool you off, which you might think is odd living in an ice age, that you get cooled by doing this, but that's important because if you would sweat, you would freeze, you'd die. So it's very important to cool off. Humans evolved in very dry regions. You want to conserve as much water as you have, so narrow nasal passages reduce less water. Also, the long limbs helps reduce the heat load that you're bringing, so we're a lot better at reducing heat than probably Neanderthals were. They're very stout and short-limbed, so they tend to hold in heat a little bit better. You can see how wide their rib cage is compared to ours, and really how thick and stronger their bones are. They're hunting some very extreme animals, so that's very much required. And if we look at Homo sapiens, Cro-Magnon living that time, you can see they would have looked like humans, very well prepared for the cold. This is a gentleman known as the Ice Man. He's been found in a glacier in the Alps. All right, so this is basically a family tree, and you kind of see how they overlapped and how they were replaced. So Homo erectus replaced Homo habilis, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals replaced erectus. I want to point out Homo forensis here. They're found in a small Indonesian area, and basically they're a human that got reduced in size due to limited resources. So they were a small human. They believe they existed at the same time during Homo sapiens, and Homo sapiens may have moved into the area, made them go extinct. Peoples that live in those Indonesian islands do have legends about Homo forensis. And when you look at their skeletons, they're short with big feet, so they've been nicknamed the Hobbit. All right, I am going to end the notes at this point. For this part, we'll do part two in the next section.